Donald Trump once marketed himself as the strongest figure on the global chessboard, but when real crises erupt, he disappears from the stage. Since a State of the Union address widely described as a disaster, he has offered almost no clear direction for international affairs. In less than a few days, we have seen North Korea announce an expansion of its nuclear arsenal, China increase military activity around Taiwan, and a serious armed clash between a vessel registered in Florida and Cuban forces that left multiple American citizens dead. Yet Trump's response has been weak and indecisive. Let's start with North Korea. Kim Jong-un has clearly declared plans to strengthen his country's nuclear forces, focusing on increasing the number of warheads and expanding real deployment capabilities. This is deliberate escalation, not internal propaganda. When a regime under international sanctions openly announces an expansion of its nuclear stockpile, it is because it believes the cost will not be high enough to force it to back down. And in Washington, instead of a strong deterrent response, there has been prolonged silence. No firm message from the Oval Office. No new strategy announced. Cowardice in foreign policy is not just about weak words. It is about avoiding confrontation when it is necessary. China understands that. In recent months, military operations around Taiwan have increased significantly, including multiple drone flights assessed as rehearsals for blockade or intrusion scenarios. This is a clear test of America's commitment to regional security, but instead of sending a strong message to reassure allies and warn Beijing, the Trump administration has chosen vague statements. He once spoke loudly about trade wars, about leverage, and maximum pressure. But when regional security is genuinely tested, that decisiveness disappears. Adversaries do not fear tweets, they fear concrete action, and when action does not appear, they will continue pushing forward. At the United Nations, America's position has looked increasingly awkward. 4 years after Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, the General Assembly voted on a resolution calling for a lasting and comprehensive peace. This was a moment when a superpower should have stood up to defend the core principles of international order, but the US did not stand with the majority supporting that resolution. While Russia continues its military campaign and casualties rise, Washington has signaled that it does not want to upset Moscow too much. That is not strategic brilliance, that is fear of direct confrontation. In the Middle East, the risk of escalation with Iran is real. Public discussions of possible scenarios suggest that Israel could act first, triggering a chain reaction. In that context, calls for regime change from Trump allies such as Lindsey Graham only heighten tensions without offering a realistic plan. More troubling is the inconsistency from the president himself. When Iranian protesters took to the streets in the past, they heard strong promises from Washington. But when crackdowns followed, no concrete protection appeared. This is a familiar pattern, tough rhetoric for a domestic audience, caution when facing international risk, a foreign policy built on domestic showmanship but excessive caution abroad does not create deterrence, it creates contempt. The incident with Cuba further exposed the lack of control. A vessel registered in Florida entered Cuban waters, leading to a gunfight that left multiple people dead and injured. This is the kind of event that can escalate into a serious diplomatic crisis. Yet instead of a clear presidential statement shaping the narrative and sending a decisive signal, Washington responded slowly. Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance said they were waiting for more information. Meanwhile, Cuban officials quickly issued accusations and seized control of the information battlefield. In modern diplomacy, whoever controls the story first controls perception. And here, the US lost the initiative from the start. When all these pieces are put together, a clear picture emerges. America's adversaries are acting more boldly, while the White House avoids moments that require strength. Donald Trump may describe himself as a tough negotiator, but in reality, when forced to choose between direct confrontation and silence, he often chooses silence. When forced to choose between defending international order and avoiding friction with other major powers, he chooses ambiguity. In geopolitics, cowardice does not always appear as troop withdrawals or public concessions. It appears as repeated hesitation, as a refusal to draw clear red lines, as allowing adversaries to test limits without immediate consequences. And right now, from Pyongyang to Beijing, from Moscow to Tehran, the message they are receiving is this: Washington no longer reacts the way it once did. When facing major powers that challenge America's position, Donald Trump chooses avoidance. But when facing businesses and dissenting voices at home, he chooses public threats. He has devoted political time and energy to publicly threatening an American entertainment company. Trump demanded that Netflix fire Susan Rice from its board of directors. He warned that if the company failed to do so, there would be consequences. Susan Rice is not a random figure. She played key roles in American foreign policy and represented Washington in international hotspots. By targeting her directly and demanding that a private company remove her from its board, Trump sent a broader message. Anyone with opposing political views can become a pressure target if they occupy space within economic power structures. What stands out is not only the demand, but the forcefulness of the tone. There was no ambiguity, no "we are reviewing," no "the situation is complex." This was direct, definitive, intimidating language, and it was directed at an American company, an American board, an American citizen. This is no longer an accidental contradiction. It is a pattern. Trump is willing to attack those without armies, without nuclear weapons, without the ability to retaliate militarily. He is forceful with the board of a media corporation. He is harsh toward domestic opposition voices. But when the real world tests limits, the response lacks comparable sharpness. A strong leader is not someone who raises his voice at those weaker than him. A strong leader is someone who stands firm against peers or more dangerous rivals. When toughness appears only in domestic culture wars, while hesitation appears in geopolitical tests, the image created is not strength. It is a symmetry of power. America's allies are not blind. Japan, South Korea, and European nations are all watching the difference between how the White House speaks to Netflix and how it speaks to Beijing or Moscow. When deterrent messages toward adversaries are blurred, but punitive messages toward domestic companies are sharp, confidence in global leadership begins to erode. Trump often constructs the image of a fearless leader, someone ready to confront others. But the real question is not self-description. The question is priority of confrontation. Confront whom? China as it increases military pressure, Russia as it continues war, or an American company because a board member holds opposing views?